Good afternoon, and welcome to Dr. G's ADHD Chat. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. I'm a neuropsychologist and clinical psychologist in private practice. I do a lot of work with ADHD, and this show is designed to make the world safe for ADHDers. Sounds a little grand, but where I'm living right now, we need a lot of help in this area, okay? And we got a lot of folks, including a lot of our teachers, who don't know anything about ADHD, and it's a real problem. Okay, the deal here, I think I said last time that I would talk about statistics. Well, I've since looked into that, and I figured out that the only way I could do that without boring everybody to death would be to go into the studio we have at work and actually be able to present stuff on a whiteboard. And I couldn't get it organized fast enough for this week, but we'll in the coming weeks. I'm not sure exactly when, because I think we're out of town next weekend, so it'll be several weeks anyway. And I will get that done, but it isn't going to be real soon. And I had someone advised me who watches the show pretty regularly that I should really emphasize the importance of getting an evaluation early. Now, I know if you're really watching and paying attention to what I'm saying, that should be pretty obvious, but here goes. If you have any thought that your child might have ADHD, if you have any family history of ADHD, or if he or she seems to be having unusual problems in school that you didn't have, say, or at least both you and your spouse did not have, then go ahead and get an evaluation done. At best, it just is, a lot about your kid. After you get done with the evaluation, you'll know how bright they are. You'll know whether they have ADHD, of course, or then you'll know whether or not they have a learning disability of some type. You should get all of that from a comprehensive evaluation. So I highly recommend earlier the better, because the kiddos with ADHD who do the best are the ones that are diagnosed and treated earliest. They also have basically the fewest objections to being treated. If you wait till they're teenagers, Lord. First of all, teenagers, they're starting to develop a mind of their own. The unfortunate part is that the judgment part of the brain is not going to develop for another 4 or 5 years. The emotional part, that's doing fine. So you get a lot of emotional stuff, but you don't get a lot of reasoning and judgment. And they're more concerned with fitting in with all their friends than they are with what's good for them long term. That's not to be condescending about teenagers, but I have had 3 of my own, and I do this kind of work for a living, so I've seen a lot of it. You want to get the evaluation done early, because the earlier you get it done, the earlier you can get them started on treatment. The best treatment is still going to be medication. And who knows what will develop in the future? I don't know. But right now, if you've got an ADHD kid, they need to be on medication. And the kids who have the biggest problem with ADHD are the ones who are not treated, who have it, but are just left to their own devices to how to get through school and how to graduate from high school, if they're going to, and how they're going to, what they're going to do as adults. You're really putting them at a big disadvantage if you don't allow them to be treated properly. Okay, so much for that. And that is not, I'm plenty busy. I don't need any more business. So it's not about that. It's about what's best for your child, and it should always be about that. Not what you're embarrassed about, not what looks best to the neighbors, what's best for your child long term. And I guarantee you, treating them as early as possible is the best way to go. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about executive functioning. Executive functioning, well, actually, some people think that ADHD should actually be called an executive functioning disorder. It's really hard to tease it apart. We're talking about, first of all, we're talking about the same part of the brain being involved, the prefrontal cortex of the brain. That's involved in executive function disorder, and it's also involved in ADHD. So is there any difference? Don't really think so, but the thing I have been reading lately, going back over some of my, I have been doing this for a lot of years. I have a lot of books on the topic. I was going back over a couple of old books and watched a couple of old presentations and stuff that I hadn't looked at in a while. And Russell Barkley, as a matter of fact, said something that kind of stuck with me. He said the way you handle all the executive functioning problems that your ADHD child has is you externalize them. And I'm thinking, wow, external. Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And basically what we're talking about is, okay, ADHDers have lousy working memory. Okay, working memory is the part of memory where you can hold 2 or 3 thoughts in your mind at the same time. That's why when you tell them to do 3 things and send them up to their room to do it, they'll get one of them done, and you'll find them playing video games thinking they're done. They're not being belligerent. Well, they won't be until you start yelling at them. Then they'll be belligerent. But they're not going to be, because they honestly, that was working memory. They couldn't hold all those 3 things in mind long enough to get them done. So that's why a lot of things that externalize what should be working memory are optimal, as in having a job board or having a morning routine board or a bedtime routine board that actually lists the tasks that need to be done in the order they need to be done and has some way of monitoring that. So you as the parent can just look and say, oh yeah, okay, they're ready. Or, whoops, he forgot this, or she didn't do that, or whatever. And we're just talking about taking a whiteboard and marking it up, and use check marks or magnets or sticky, not sticky, not on a whiteboard, but just use something so that they physically have to do something after they've done every task. They put on their pajamas, they brush their teeth, they wash their faces. I don't know, whatever your routine is. They put their books and their clothes out for the next day, whatever routine you've got, but you've got actual steps that are written someplace where they can actually see them. Or if they're too young to be reading, where they get pictures that they can tell what they're supposed to be doing. But what you've done is you've taken it from something that's in here that they're supposed to be remembering, and you've put it on the wall somewhere where they can just look at it and check it. Much preferable, okay? The other thing is, somebody liked that idea. The other thing is externalizing. ADHDers have famously poor sense of time passage. The 15 minutes is the same to them as an hour and a half, depending, and also because of that lack of good time awareness, they don't have a really good sense of how long it takes them to do a given thing. Like, how long is it going to take you to read this book and do the book report? And they won't have a clue. Again, you break that out. You externalize it. You well, there are two things you need to be doing. One is timers. You got to use timers. Get the spookiest, craziest timers you can find. Funny things or crazy things, but as long as they're a timer. As long as they tell the time, we don't care. Okay? And you set them, and you start using them regularly. If they got homework, you set up time, the length of time. They work for 30 minutes, they get 10 minutes off. They work for 30 minutes, get 10 minutes off. That kind of thing. That what you're trying to do is train them to stick with something for a period of time, and regularly take a break when they need to, or not when they need to, but by the numbers. Okay, so you're trying to establish a sense of time by being constantly reminded about time. It is a pretty interesting sort of process when you start to realize that they really don't have a good sense of time. They really don't. They just, and they get frustrated because they think it's taking longer than it's actually taking, that kind of thing. So you will be able to cross-check them. Say, no, it's only been 20 minutes. You still got 10 minutes to go, or whatever. And so that's really an important thing. If they've got a study space and they don't have a timer there, you're missing a great opportunity. So get you a bunch of timers and put them in there. And like I said, make them something that's kind of fun to mess with. Anyway, so the other thing you need to do is you're going to have to teach it, but before you teach it, you're going to have to show them how to do project planning. And project planning, I mean external project planning. I mean having a schedule laid out. This week I have to read 100 pages. This week I need to read the next 100 pages. This week I need to create an outline. This week I need to write the first paragraph. And so on. You need to break it out. It's, my daughter is a professional project manager, and she's got all kinds of fancy software and stuff that does a lot of the stuff for her. I don't necessarily think you need to go that far, but they ought to be able to look at their next, say semester, marking period, whatever, and know what they need to do to get the project, whatever. There's usually one big one that they have to get done, that they know what steps they need to do and when they need to get them done. And this is a good chance for you to negotiate with them, and explain to them why they need so much time to do this, and what that means is that they won't have to work so hard either at the end when they're trying to make up for all the time they spent just messing around and didn't get anything done, and they hopefully will, it gives you a chance to negotiate. And I think that's another thing that folks who have troubles with their kids and when they get to be teenagers are people who never taught them to negotiate. Oh, negotiation is an important task, an important ability, and it's one you got to train into your child. Otherwise, you ever seen a 16-year-old who's still using 8-year-old methods for controlling his parents? And you know what? They're still working. I've seen quite a lot of that, and you need to get them, throwing a temper tantrum when you're 16 is a little bit ridiculous and truthfully not very effective. Let's teach you an effective way to do it. And if you can't do it, their therapist sure should be able to. And so that's a really important thing, and that keeps it from getting emotional, because these kiddos don't have really good emotional regulation, right? Everything's pretty frustrating in their world. They don't have a good sense of time. They're always getting behind. They wander off. Stuff doesn't get done. Magically, it doesn't get done. And so life is frustrating. So one of the ways around that, and you're not going to directly teach them to be better emotional regulators. Well, that's not entirely true, but till the training starts to take over, you want to be reducing the number of things that are frustrating them. And there's a logical plan. You externalizing everything that they have troubles with, and it's going to be mostly executive functioning stuff, self-control, control of emotions, time sense, time management, planning, all those things. And you need to get it out of here and get it down on paper or a whiteboard, something. A piece of sticky paper on the wall doesn't really matter, but you need to have it somewhere where they can see it and respond to it over and over and over again. That is my version of externalizing executive functioning for these kiddos. And it's, let's just say, it's more realistic to set up plans and stuff for them to follow, structure for them to follow, than it is to keep expecting them to do something they really can't do. Okay, and that's what a lot of us who had ADHD kids before we knew anything about ADHD did. We kind of expected, what's that? Everybody else does this. Why can't he or why can't she? That's loser thinking. That won't get you anywhere. You got to figure out, I've got a problem. This kid can't remember from one minute to the next what he's supposed to be doing. We're going to externalize it. We're going to take it out of his head and we're going to put it down on a whiteboard or put it down on a piece of paper or whatever. But that is your way of helping externalize the executive functions that they have troubles with and making it more likely that not only will they get stuff done, but they'll be a lot less frustrated with the world. And eventually, hopefully, the idea would be that they will start to internalize some of these procedures and start, writing out plans and schedules and that sort of thing for themselves. They can do it, and once they do it, they'll look at it and follow it. They just won't do it if they try to keep it in their head, because they'll forget about it. They just won't think it needs to be done. They won't think it's such a big deal. And we all have had those experiences, those of us who are parents of ADHD kids. What do you mean you haven't turned in your homework for the whole semester? And it's sitting there in a crumpled mess down at the bottom of your book bag with old sandwich wrappers. Okay, so that's the deal. You're having a problem in a given situation. Is there a way to externalize it? Is there a way to put it on a whiteboard? Is there a tool I can buy, like a timer? Or apps nowadays. Although, honestly, the problem with using apps is you're only one button push away from Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and then they're gone. So if you keep it out of the phone and keep it more in the business of on the wall, on the piece of paper that's under the glass on the desk or whatever, it doesn't really matter where you put it. What it matters is that there's something they can follow and track progress, either check marks or move the magnet or move the Velcro thing, whatever, but you can, and that way you can tell pretty well how they're doing, or if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, well, that is me talking about executive functioning and externalizing it. And I invite you to try it out. You know, it's school starting soon for most of us. Some people are already in school, and guess what? It didn't magically get better over the summer. I know there are parents who think that that should happen. I know there are parents because next week will be the time when my phone at the office will start ringing off the hook with people who are wondering if I could perhaps expedite an ADHD evaluation for their child and get it done in the first 2 weeks of school. I'm sorry, but if your doctor's any good, he's going to be booked for a long time. You're not going to have, 3 or 4 hours for testing and an intake free just because you had more hope than executive functioning yourself. You've got to plan ahead. You got to be pretty practical minded about it. Magic stuff doesn't happen over the summer. It just feels easier because they don't have as many restrictions that they've got to follow. Okay, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. This has been Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the program to make the world safe for ADHD. And remember, the world is not changed by conventional thinkers, by people who think inside the box. The world is changed by people who think outside the box. Perhaps your child will be the one who will solve some big problem that's bothering us now. But you gotta encourage them, and you gotta make sure that they are flexible, resilient kids and adults. Well, flexible, resilient kids grow into flexible, resilient adults typically. So, if you have any topics you'd like me to cover, anything like that, write it down beside this or next to it or wherever it is, and we'll try to get to it. Okay, we will catch you next time. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat.